afternoon and welcome to the next episode of Level Up Cyber Live. I'm your host, Tony Bryan, and super excited about our discussion today with Mr. Eric Dunker. So Eric, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, Eric and I have had the pleasure of working together for the past 2 years and got introduced through the NICE National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education Apprenticeship Community of Interest. Eric in Arapahoe Community College, where he serves, has done some incredible work around the idea of apprenticeship, and I think has really been a great testament to the important role that a community college can play within this apprenticeship game. So before we jump in, Eric, I'd love for you to, you've got an incredible kind of history and background and bio. I'd love for you just to introduce yourself to the group for those who don't know you.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Eric. I serve as the Vice President for Workforce and Economic Development for Arapahoe Community College. Arapahoe Community College is located in the South Metro region of Denver, serve a little over 12,000 students a semester. My portfolio includes, we designed and built a new collaboration campus in one of the fastest growing areas of the U.S. in Castle Rock, Colorado. We opened that 3.5 years ago, and it's co-located with K-12. We're the owner-operator of the community college, 4-year universities, the workforce center, the small business development center, and some local industry. And from there, a lot of our apprenticeship strategy and operations were kind of born out of there, because it's really the entire talent ecosystem working together to create streamlined solutions for students, to reduce debt, increase access to industry with the appropriate credentials, and then of course industry. So we all know there's a huge talent shortage out there. There's 2 open jobs for every 1 job seeker, and industry needs a new way of recruiting and honing in talent. So we feel like apprenticeship, when done with the entire ecosystem, is one of the best solutions. So on top of that, I help do our advancement work, our fundraising work, and I also am overseeing a new campus that we're opening in fall of 23 that's located actually in one of the bigger high schools here. So, and before that, I was at Oregon State University as a regional director for outreach and engagement. And then prior to that, I was at MSU Denver, which is a large Hispanic serving institution, downtown Denver, Colorado, and I served in a variety of roles there for around 10 years. There's more to me, but we'll leave it at that for now.
You do a lot. I know I was impressed with the Aspen Institute, right? The Rising Presidents Fellowship.
Oh, sure.
Aspen does some incredible programming, and I think they do a great job of shaping future leaders and future folks that are going to do great things for our country. And I'm sure a great program are probably beneficial for you, just learning and growing around so many other people of great minds. So. And I will also add the school campus is beautiful. It's not, downtown Denver, of course, but it's, close proximity to Denver Technology, DTC. Man, that's just, a buzz of energy, of all the great things that are happening and representative of the state of Colorado. So I want to jump in just to the state of Colorado for just a second, because there's a lot of great things that the state is doing. I had the pleasure of spending most of my Thursday with a pretty large group of kind of leaders in the St. Louis area. They were talking around workforce, and CompTIA came in, and we were talking about all these like best practices in other states, right? And there were a couple of just nuggets that I took out of there of just like, there's so many great examples of things that are happening across the country that I think people can learn from and either modify or adopt in their own kind of backyard. And I think Denver is, the state of Colorado has done some great stuff, right? So we'll start with the grant that you guys are currently on, right? The CoTech grant, right? That CyberUp is supporting Arapahoe Community College. I think was I'd love for you to just share a little bit about the CoTech grant and just highlight some of the goals within that program as a whole.
Well, let me to your point, let me bring it back to what's going on in Colorado. Why do we want to be leaders in the apprenticeship space, and how is that sausage being made? Number one, it really helps when your governor And Jared Polis has been extremely supportive of apprenticeship. It's really a bipartisan effort in Colorado, very supportive of you don't do it in silos, you do it as an ecosystem. So having your economic development corporations partner with industry, partner with the higher ed ecosystem, the K-12 ecosystem, and basically telling us, we'll incentivize funding, we'll incentivize grants, we'll ask industry to invest if you guys can figure out this, fragmented K-12 to higher ed to jobs situation that we've kind of made a mess of collectively in this whole nation over the last 40, 50 years. There's certainly benefits of our higher ed system, more accessible than most other countries, but we've made it very challenging for students to navigate. We're at $1.8 trillion of student loan debt. We have a lot of students who, by the time who does graduate, they don't have oftentimes any experience in their field, right? So how do you solve for those things? So I would say number one is Jared Polis has been very, and before him, our now Senator John Hickenlooper, very supportive of apprenticeships, providing the resources, the incentives our way. Number two is our industry partners here have been very forward-thinking in apprenticeships. So from your Lockheed Martins, from Centura Health, and Centura is the largest medical provider in the state of Colorado, over 21,000 employees. Health One, some of your utility companies, they're just open to doing things a different way now. Colorado is, again, I think had the number one fastest economic recovery from COVID, still has one of the fastest growing job markets in the country, and not enough talent to support it. And so that's where another reason the table has been set for the why of apprenticeship, right? Now it's on us to do the work. And so over the last 4 years, we've been, again, there's one thing about getting a grant and then, yes, we got this great grant. CoTech is one of them. CoHelps is another one for healthcare. But if you don't have the partnerships and you don't have the programming, those things don't matter, right? So what we did 4 or 5 years ago, as we were designing the STEM collaboration canvas, is really talk about that earn and learn model, integrating that apprenticeship model into all of our pathways. So we slowly we ideated with Centura Health, what's now is the largest healthcare apprenticeship in the state of Colorado 4 years ago. Went from just talking about it to then doing it the next year. And that helped us garner some grants to really build our infrastructure. And we do that statewide. We don't just stay in our South Metro region. We try to scale where industry wants to scale. So we saw the success doing that. We've done some apprenticeships with water utilities. And then we saw the technology grant come. And we're like, there's got to be a way that we can take advantage of the need for good talent in the tech space, right? So we developed some partnerships with industry. They wrote us some support letters. And then Tony and I got connected through our many networks. And we started talking, hey, instead of trying to do this ourselves, let's get a company like CyberUp who has a track record doing this somewhere else. There is no CyberUp in Colorado, at least before Tony and I started working. Kind of like an intermediary that can really help broker these relationships with technology, and then create pre-apprenticeship to apprenticeship pathways. So when we were doing the CoTech grant, we felt like it was important to write in CyberUp as our main, intermediary. We have a degree in cyber, but all the other things, how that pathway to a cyber job can be very complex. So all that being said, we're all about pathways and partnerships here. And if it makes sense, then we'll go for the grant. So when we started talking to Tony and CyberUp, they said, we're in. We don't have a Colorado presence yet, but we have some companies that have a presence in Colorado. So let's talk. So wrote them in, and we feel really good about our model. Is that, again, internally, we have the local relationships with cyber companies or companies who need cyber talent. But what we don't have is the bandwidth to do the very, very expansive outreach, and then sort of cultivating that outreach into in-person meetings and then pitches, and then again creating that model from pre-apprenticeship to apprenticeship in the cyberspace. And so that's where CyberUp has been really helpful. So our CoTech grant, this relationship with CyberUp, not have been possible without the grant. But it's really important when you're going for grants like this to make sure you have the partnerships in the first place. Then you can get the grant. So we're getting better at that, but that's essentially how we work with CyberUp now, and we're really thankful for that partnership.
Well, the one thing for Governor Polis that I think speaks volumes, right, and reinforces everything that you just said around apprenticeship and community college is that he came out and eliminated degree requirements for all state jobs, right? And there aren't many areas or states or regions that are adopting that right now, and I think the trend will continue to grow and more will grow over the next several years. But that's a really large, in my mind, is a big commitment from a state that, hey, we want to embrace non-traditional pathways. We want to embrace things like community colleges, and really sets the tone, I think, for everybody and makes it a little bit easier for everybody. For CyberUp, we've always been very skills path agnostic, right? Skill path being, there are lots of great ways for somebody to get skills within cybersecurity, right? Or technology. It could be anything. Traditional pathways of a community college and a 4-year program are incredible pay-to-play boot camps. Also, we all serve a little different role, and where the rubber really meets the road for all this is really that kind of first job attainment, right? Because that's the goal for all of this stuff. But I've always been a big fan of the community college model, right? Because when we get called and somebody says, "Hey, I'm interested in getting into cyber, where do I start?" And I always ask you a couple questions around like, well, what's your timeline? What's your budget? And what's the best way for you to learn? Right? Those are 3 kind of quick questions, but it helps set like, hey, I have no money. Well, okay, where I have a little bit of money, then a community college program is a great option, right? It's and if you have time but not a ton of money, community college is great. Let's say I have time, I don't have any time, but a little bit of money, like a boot camp is great. Or if you don't have money and you have time, right? Then a free program like ours is also great.
So I love, well, real quick. So I love the community college model too, but the American model of higher ed is still very much, where businesses are a consumer of the product, right? So you go to class for 2 to 4 years, whether it's an associate degree or 4-year degree, and then maybe there's an internship if you're really motivated and you have a really strong leadership in your program, and that may or may not lead to a job or to experience with that company or to the industry. At the same time, 80% of a community college student or an access-oriented 4-year university student work while they go to college. So much of that work is disconnected, right? So the promise of access-oriented higher ed in America is great, but we still have that very consumer model of go to higher ed, probably absorb debt. You probably have a 45% chance of graduating, and hopefully that leads to a good job. Whereas an apprenticeship with the community college model, you can get hands-on experience from day one if we essentially calibrate that ecosystem the right way. Let's get you into an earn and learn job in that pathway, and then while you're doing that job, maybe it's 3 days a week, you can be close to full time at your community college or even your 4-year university in that pathway, and then that's 5 days a week, and then ideally, that's going to, you already have an entry-level job. So by the time you get that certification or degree, you're not overqualified for an entry-level job. You're actually going for a mid-level job. And that's the goal is, again, once you are engaged in your pathway and you really love it, you're going to be so much more excited about the work and the learning. Because it's interwoven. And that's where like a CyberUp and an ACC will partner together and make that sauce, kind of create that sausage for industry so they can start recruiting that talent much earlier in that person's career. And again, apprenticeship, when done well, is proven to be a successful model. So the USDOL says it's about 92% success rate for all U.S. apprenticeships, and that's what we're sort of seeing, at Arapahoe Community College, compared to sometimes a 40, 50%, graduation rate for your average student who's not going through an apprenticeship. It's a stark difference, and it also solves for equity. In our apprenticeship programs, We take our students of color, which are 50% of our students of color of all of our apprenticeships, 50% of our apprentices are students of color. We have equitable graduation rates. So people talk all the time, how do you solve for equity? How do you create a more equitable workforce? Apprenticeships, when done well, is a very good way to do that. So again, just all the ways of, yes, we love community colleges. We love the promise of being accessible in this country, but we have to recalibrate our traditional classroom-based model, get a degree, then get a job, to you can get a job in your pathway and get the education, and you can make that work together from day one.
I know I've had lots of conversations, and it happened. I had the pleasure of spending a couple days with folks from the Code Tech grant and ACC up at Department of Labor 2 weeks ago in regards to the specific grant that we're both supporting, the Closing the Skills Gap grant. And so in that conversation, I had one of the grantees come up to me and share a story that I've heard so many times of his son who went to college and got a 4-year degree in cyber, and then, finished that. And he was like completely blown away and shocked that there wasn't any type of industry recognized credential or any type of technical or hands-on experience that his son had participated. So he actually had to bring his son back home. He's in San Antonio, and pay for his son to go get an additional certification and additional training that was not necessarily covered in a degree, where in his brain, that would have been part of the curriculum or part of the learning experience of a 4-year program, as that would have been embedded. And I do think, not every program is created equally, but in this particular instance, I think the community college model does a much better job than a 4-year program in the industry recognized credential. So, I'd love for you to, expand on that a little bit. That'd be
sure. It's a win-win situation, right? So community college is one of the hallmarks is we have excellent relationships with our industry partners that are local. And some of those industry partners, like for us, it's Lockheed Martin, who is a global company. Western Union, their headquarters is here, global company. Charles Schwab's second largest office in the United States is located 6 miles from the STEM Collaboration Campus. So we have the opportunity to listen, hear the conversations that these industry partners are having, and then we're on the hook, as we should be, for co-creating with them, as opposed to just giving them a blueprint and saying, here's what we have. Hopefully this works for you. So we have been co-creating, recalibrating our curriculum with our industry partners' input to make sure it's leading to good jobs. And community colleges have more flexibility. And to be honest, let's talk about it, the enrollment incentive as well. Because in the last 10 years, a lot of regional public universities now, because of a declining birth rate in this country, the way they can grow enrollment is through online, creating national programs. So the reality is anybody can create content and curriculum. English 101 is English 101, right? What's going to set you apart from a robust higher education institution? It's your relationships with industry. It is your ability to get your students into great jobs, into great pathways that, like an agnostic online provider doesn't have the bandwidth to do. And so we're taking the promise of that, and then again, we're melding the two of, maybe we're going to give you credit for work experience. Let's figure out what you're learning on the job. And then if that's duplicated in your program, we're going to give you credit for it. We're going to honor the experience, what both you bring to the table and are bringing to the table. And yes, that flexibility and the support of our faculty in doing that. All of our career tech ed pathways have advisory groups led by industry. They know, things are changing faster than ever before, and so do we. They don't care that our, say, 4-credit sometimes process could take up to a year and a half. So it's like, fine, launch it as non-credit, and then we'll worry about the credit portion later, because they need people who want to be in certain pathways like technology, advanced manufacturing, healthcare, in these spaces, and learning the new technologies and engage with their companies and getting into pathways and do a good job. And whatever it takes is what they want us to do. And so we don't have And we had the ability to do, non-credit workforce programs. We had the ability to blend non-credit and credit, and that's where some of these grants are helping us build capacity to do that. And so, good example of that is we just received a $4.7 million Department of Labor grant to build what we call micro credentials into IT and healthcare. The reason why we got that grant is because we've been doing that work over the last 4 years because of our apprenticeship work on the fringes, and now we have the ability to scale this work. So, in partnership with Tony and CyberUp, and in partnership with healthcare, we're going to do to better stack credentials that lead to the top growing positions in Colorado. So software development, cybersecurity, and IT, and then nursing obviously is a shortage everywhere in the U.S. How do you get creative in getting more nurses in the pipeline? So we realize a lot of our work in apprenticeships and working with companies like Tony has helped us build our brand and our capacity to get some of these national grants, federal grants, large federal grants, because they see the work that we're doing, they see the potential this has. And I think you're seeing a lot of money now, resources come the community colleges way because they realize we're flexible, we're adaptable, and we're about relevancy to our local communities. And so it's nice to see the resources start coming our way too, but we also realize we have to do the work. We have to make sure, again, starts with partnerships and pathways, and that is exactly what we're trying to do in that cyberspace.
I think it helps a little bit. Dr. Joe Biden still teaches community college, right? It's been
but it's a bipartisan situation, right?
For sure.
The reality is you need pathways to good jobs. Nobody is happy with the student loan debt number in this country. Nobody wants to have disengaged youth between the ages of 16 and 24 at the prime of your growth trajectory. And so how does our ecosystem come alongside of that? And so that's what's great, no matter who's president, right? I mean, under the Trump administration, you saw apprenticeship legislation, you saw an advancement of efforts to scale, pathways to good jobs, essentially, right? Sometimes political parties have different ways of saying it, but they want the same thing. So I feel really good about this work, no matter who's in charge, realizing the value proposition of the community colleges, industries, and intermediaries like Tony working together and creating more streamlined pipelines to good jobs that reduce student loan debt, advance career potential, and then help fill key talent shortages in the U.S. Sorry.
No. I mean, 3 administrations later, from an apprenticeship kind of focus, which is great.
Yes.
It has been party agnostic, but the consistent messaging that I've seen from all of those really has been that the administrations are viewing community colleges and apprenticeship as a great complement to high-paying careers and paths for folks that doesn't, again, anchor them with a gazillion dollars of student loan debt, and have the ability to still have access to those jobs, regardless of socioeconomic background for those folks. And they've put the money behind it to really help. And it doesn't seem that the funding is going to slow down, right? There's still more and more things, I think, specifically to cybersecurity, right? There's federal planning grants being put out to states to help states think through their statewide strategy, right? Because, we're both in fairly big cities, but there are tons of rural communities and smaller towns across the country that have very little, if any, access to smart, bright technologists that are ensuring that their networks and their systems are being protected in the right way, which is a problem.
Well, and you and I both come across this. I think sometimes the biggest misnomer of apprenticeships is it's job training without a pathway to a degree. Because we all know the research, and I do believe in it, that an associate's or bachelor's degree, some sort of post-secondary credential, is a much stronger path to the middle class and beyond for Americans, right? But both things can be true. You can get great on-the-job training experience and get a pathway to a degree. And that's where higher ed and apprenticeships have been sort of divorced from each other for almost 100 years. And now over the last 5 or 10 years, you're seeing a lot more synergy with an apprenticeship with stackable pathways to an associate's or bachelor's degrees, for our students. And that is what I like to call the new school apprenticeships. Both things can be true. We absolutely believe a path to a post-secondary credential, certificate, associate's degree, or bachelor's degree is absolutely the best way towards middle class and beyond. But we also know there's a lot of people that have bachelor's degrees or have some college and no degree that have been saddled with, thousands of dollars of student loan debt, and oftentimes did not have the job training as they're embarking on their pathway. And oftentimes that's our murky middle of people who are lost, who are doing 3 different entry-level jobs because they don't know what their next path is. So if we could help solve for some of that through working with, again, an intermediary like Tony, us, and industry, and packaging the whole thing together, we're not saying this is the path for all Americans, but this should be a viable path for a lot of Americans who have not been served well by our traditional college or nothing pathways or options or advice that's been given to them by well-meaning student counselors, high school counselors.
I mean, I really think that even in this scenario for somebody, a young person that, finishes a 2-year program at 20 or hits an apprenticeship where they get that job, that employer is more than likely, if that person's great, will invest in that person to go back to school and finish that 4-year degree, right? Like there's a lot of great continuing education. So instead of, you're saying all this as I'm getting ready to help my daughter embark on her college journey, and I'm looking at tuition cost, right? And then I'm always mindful of like, what's the degree that's coming out of it, right? Like a liberal arts degree, and it's great. It's really hard to go make money on that, right? Or an art history, like there's so many art history jobs, but when you start getting into more technical stuff, where I think that's where, the gig economy is boomed, right? There's a lot of highly educated people in the world right now that are really struggling to find jobs. And, there's other ways to go out and make money in 2023, especially with COVID, where people are saying like, man, I could own my time and drive DoorDash or Uber and still make for corporate America, but control my destiny. It's we're in an interesting crossroads, I think, just for education and also for companies who are hiring.
We are. And one of the other misnomers of an apprenticeship is, well, does that mean I'm married to that profession or married to that pathway for the rest of my life? And the answer is no. But here's what you do learn: all the soft skills. And we, a lot of times now we're considering them hard skills: showing up on time, teamwork, critical thinking, problem solving, working with others. You get that in a real world environment during an apprenticeship, and employers know that. So yeah, let's say you wanted to switch from health tech or vice versa after an apprenticeship. Yes, I'm sure that company would love for you to stay there in that pathway. But if you find your passion somewhere else, like millions of our students do, because when you look at how many people are changing majors or transfer colleges, the same can be true for apprenticeship. But if you do go through an apprenticeship, think about, it's not about the technical skills are great, but it's about all the other skills that most employers say are the most in need. That's hard to train, which is, again, problem solving, critical thinking, showing up on time, working well with others, leading teams. Those are, to me, are the most beneficial things you're going to learn on an apprenticeship. But if the company is treating you well and you're doing well by that company, even if you wanted to change your pathway from health to IT, a lot of these major corporations have both, right? So ideally, you can stay with that company who's hopefully being a good actor and still shift, but they know you, they've trained you, they've seen you work. And so the pathway to promotion, upward mobility is still going to be stronger than if somebody, yes, they may have gotten a degree somewhere else, but they don't know about the real world experience. They're kind of going to try them out their first time working for that employer. So there's a leg up for apprenticeships that so many people don't see that reality when they just think of what apprenticeships were like 100 years ago, or thinking about, the technical skills and pathway, because it is a bit more streamlined, into cybersecurity, for instance, for a cyber pathway, but that doesn't mean you're married to that the rest of your life. But think about all the skills you're going to build while doing that. Sorry, I'll stop with my soapbox. But
no, it's a great.
I hear that all the time.
between the good examples, there are, there was a lot of great examples given last week with that CompTIA and Tech STL discussion. But there were common, there were multiple steps to it, right? Like at the surface, like, oh, we did this thing with this K-12 school. Like, great. That makes a ton of sense. But there was also a tax created within that community that gave funding to do those things, right? So that there's always the program, but there's always some other support. So like having, governors that get excited about this, or states get excited about apprenticeship and really lead a region-wide or a statewide initiative, right? The federal government can only do so much for us in the grand scheme of things and try to set policies and parameters, but it really is, partnerships like ours, reinforced by, and I really loathe politics, so I hate to keep coming back to this, but they do have the ability to like make policies and create changes that makes the work of everybody's a little bit easier, or in fact, incentivize companies to do those things, right? Like, I still would love to see tax incentives or tax breaks or tax rebates for corporations for those that are doing apprenticeship, right? To create incentives for them, because there's been a lot of emphasis and focus put on apprenticeship, but there really hasn't been anything nationally created that incentivizes a company, right? Though I've seen some creative companies do things, that have been able to take advantage of it, but that case, like one-offs.
Tony, you and I have talked about this. Think about all the hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars, actually, the federal government's talking about how to take care of prior wrongs of our system. So, it's great. You don't want people saddled with debt, right? But could you take half of that and talk about future incentives and how is the system going to change, right? Not putting a Band-Aid on stuff, but could you take some of those hundreds of millions of dollars and create an incentive program, both for students? So how do you incentivize the behavior? How do you subsidize maybe tuition, student loans through work-based learning? And then how do you provide tax credits, for industry partners who are contributing to our U.S. economy and that need that skilled workforce? And there's a lot of room on the incentive and guardrails conversation, in this country, and that's a bipartisan issue. If you want to make it happen, there are other examples out there. Some states like Montana and South Carolina have done some pretty innovative things. But the reality is because they know it works. And that's why there's so much. What's great to be in this space now, even though apprenticeships have been around hundreds of years, what can be for apprenticeships, apprenticeships have actually doubled in this country over the last 10 years. So, from a very small number, about 2% of the U.S. workforce, now it's about 5%. But what if we got to 20%? How much student loan debt would we be absolving? How many more prepared workers would we have for our complex and changing economy? So I love seeing what can be, and the work we're doing right now is a good example of how we can create partnerships and recalibrate how we've done business historically and work together to build a new model for industry and education.
Well, it's crazy how fast 30 minutes goes, by the way. So we're already at 33. So, I don't know. We're both, I think it's fair to say we're both passionate about apprenticeship. It's a big part of both of our daily lives and our organization lives. And I think the holistically, we both want this to work because we see the importance of the subject matter. And I think the importance and the shortages in healthcare, teachers, cyber, code, there's so many, accounting is one that I know for us had a huge impact. There's accountant shortage all across the country. So everything that I'm doing within financial anything, my costs are skyrocketing because they have to continue to pay more and more for accountants just because for retention, and that has a trickle down effect for all of this stuff. So, all right, last question, which is always the big one, is what advice would you give for somebody who's looking to level up? And I'm gonna open up broad for you, whether they want to level up an apprenticeship program or level up their career. Like, what advice would you give to those folks?
Yeah, it's always a combination of what credentials and technical expertise do you have or do you need? And then what work experience do you have or do you need, right? And then I would say find organizations like CyberUp or, Arapahoe Community College or other good organizations that are doing this work that have already recalibrated how they do things so both can be true. How are you going to get the work experience and the credentials so you can level up? You need both. And oftentimes you get an inexperienced worker with a great credential getting frustrated because they're overqualified from a credential standpoint on their interviews for entry-level jobs, but they don't get hired because they don't have experience. And I think the old notion was, well, if I want to get experience, I don't have the time to do a degree. And that is not true anymore. With the way we've designed curriculum that can be deployed anytime, anywhere, on any device. So find ecosystems that encourage earn and learn behavior. Find, if you're working for a company, I would bet they offer some sort of tuition reimbursement. So see not just tuition reimbursement, but hey, if I do this program, what opportunities at this company will this lead to, right? Ask those good questions. And I would say engage yourselves with good actors in higher ed, industry, intermediary world who are working together to make this stuff, to make leveling up a reality for you and your family.
That was a concrete and great answer. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. Make sure you join us next week. I'm eager to get on with John Brandt. He's at ISACA. We're going to talk a little bit about just the hiring and retention challenges, right? So we talked a little bit about the front end of how you're finding people. We're going to talk about, we're all seeing in the news, the layoffs and all the different things, what does that really look like? And what our companies, the challenges they're experiencing both with hiring and retention. So until next week, appreciate you guys. Eric, appreciate you joining me today in the discussion. And I appreciate just your leadership for the state of Colorado and the great work you do at ACC, and, and appreciate the partnership with CyberUp. So until next week, thanks for tuning in.
All right. Well, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.